Okay, what's happening with the stream? Okay. All right, let's begin again. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Mr.Within channel. The title of today's live stream and episode is A Freedom Behind the Doors of Isolation. I wanted to speak about this concept, and I specifically want to focus on the word behind the doors of isolation, as if in your mind you could imagine solitude being some state where the person's waiting to see what comes up next. It is as if we want to see what is behind the door of that state of being. Life is a series of experiences that are constantly redefining individuality, as if our individuality is being sculpted and polished by many experiences and many preferences and emotional up and downs. You see, the way language is designed is we move forward linearly. It's as if like it goes A, B, C, D, in some sense. There needs to be a certain structure of recognition. For example, when I'm speaking, these are words part of the English language, and so the English language comes to people's minds differently. That's why there's many writers. But the whole idea is that there's certain moments a human being goes to and goes within, where life in some sense isolates them karmically. And this is not something like it's not something to pay too much attention to, the fact of the isolation, but in some sense it's as if many things in my life, many experiences I've had, many moments of being I've had on this planet, my mind, the reality behind my eyes had an expectation of the reality in front of my eyes, but that expectation unexpectedly broke in some situations in this life, where I realized that it's as if nature, the let's call it the spirit of nature within existence, it was like moving my attention away from the insincere aspects of my reality, as if we make many decisions and these decisions have an echo, and this echo, if the decision is made insincerely, there will come moments of insincere expression. So in some sense, there is a witness within our eyes constantly justifying what it is witnessing in order to perceive more. And so isolation becomes solitude once time is out of the picture. So isolation is usually a character in a story that doesn't have access to other characters or other environments. But when one is in such a position, it's not that they should let their mind still generate stories of sadness and depression or something like that. For me, depression is like you have better ways to use your time than being depressed, because time is just a hint to not forget why your eyes are open, based on, in some sense, the humble vision you have within, right? So what I mean by this is that there are moments where the inner realm and the outer realm intersect as a non-local awareness. And what I mean by that is I have paid attention. I have in some sense studied my imagination and studied how my mind generates concepts. And it wasn't like a studying of a conceptual sorts, even though that was included later on. But it was in some sense an experiential seeking of the source of the experience. So I became curious. It's like when I was younger, especially being raised in a religious environment, it was very fascinating, as if my mind had stopped asking certain questions. Just a second, guys, I gotta answer a phone call. Hello. سلام بابا، من وسط تاکم، بذار بعدش میام. خداحافظ. خداحافظ، میام بعدش. Sorry about that, guys. Just there was no way to handle that without, handling it. So, what I was speaking on was in some sort uh, the relationship of memory and imagination to an individuality, to an individualized impression of self extracted out of sensory perception. So my senses are like the piano fingers that create the melody of my imagination, in some sense, that my imagination is in some sense image based, and it is also in some sense awareness based. Awareness per se does not need to have an image, but there is an acknowledgement of a self presence. What I mean by self presence is that you realize an aspect of your intelligence has been presently watching your waking life since the beginning of your birth till this current moment, and even continuing on. This intelligence of awareness, of your presence, it's that same intelligence that watches you every birthday blow that candle and still be the same you, as if you have grown, but that you hasn't changed. Do you see? So there is a relationship that consciousness provides that is changeless in regards to the identity, changeless in regards to the individualism of the being. So that means the only thing that truth can be for any being experiencing existence is an experience. And so the experience is kind of divided between what is experience and the experiencer. And the experiencer within comes across as having an intelligible personality. So this was one of those profound questions I had, where I was like, if I have access to my own mind, let's say nobody can see what I see behind my eyes, in some sense, how would I say this? It's like, to be truly individuals that in society honor liberty and freedom of all dimensions of being, one has to confront a chaotic isolation of a realization that no one has access to your eyes other than the self within those eyes, which comes to be not a concept, not a thought, but a moment of attention. It becomes an unspeakable attention, as if it's like Icarus flying towards the sun, with his candle wings of, knowledge and whatever he's accumulated to consider reality, and he flies towards the sun. And there's words from people from the past and people from the future, in some sense guiding Icarus, being like, no, Icarus, do not fly so high towards the truth. And Icarus flies towards the truth, and then his wings melt. His knowledge, in some sense, detaches from his identity, and he falls. That's the ego death, in some sense. That's the beauty of Greek mythology. I find that it's not all just should be taken for literal value, but more metaphorical value, because in some sense we relate through perception, and perception displays itself in many ways, in some sense. So what I mean by that is that you Anytime life is, when I say life, like I'm trying to say this in a way where any kid in the world can understand that there is life happening here. Okay, there's this thing called life. We're a part of it. An aspect of this intelligence, after billions of years of evolution, has managed to separate itself from the world, build languages, build technologies, which are the evolutionary results of the languages man has made, and in some sense realize that we are reaching a point where our sophistication of moving and being active in sensory perception is showing us greater dimensions. So what that means is, as mankind's technologies get closer to infinity, the identity of man it crumbles based on every step of technology, in the sense that we become defined by what we do or what we can do rather than what we are. You see, that's kind of like the issue of this planet in regards to carelessness, that we are so obsessed about doing the right thing that we forget where we are. We forget how we are. We forget the nature of the world and the world our ancestors walked in, even though we do not have their eyes, but their DNA in some sense is a torch passed on to our vision. So what I am saying to you, dear listeners, is that there will come moments in this life where you cannot just assume everything's going to be ordered. There's going to be chaos. There's going to be chaos, and especially when the being gets older, goes into old age, chaos expresses itself, but it is the will. Have you heard that term where they say where there's a will, there's a way? You know, and that's very crucial, because that will does not have a locally physical origin. It has to do with the magnitude of the vision behind the eyes of the being and how advanced that being perceives the communicator of reality. For me, there have been moments where I consciously communicate, like in this moment right now, I'm consciously communicating to you. But there have been moments where I've just been sitting, like waiting at the bus, and I've just watched my mind just roll through many different thoughts, as if for a second, I'm standing beside a river, this fast-moving river, and I'm watching just the water constantly move, and just realizing the profoundness of what Heraclitus, this Greek philosopher, said. Heraclitus said, no man can step in the same river twice, and it is not the same man, and it is not the same river. That means in our attempt to create patterns, we have to consider less change than how much actually the world is changing. That is the point of language. That is the point of thought. We made a world inside a world because we could consider a slower speed of it. So for me, for Mr. Within, consciousness is moving faster than the speed of light, but the ego is actually not moving faster than the speed of light. It is moving much slower. So what that means is we are a faceted, multidimensionally driven creature. A creature that can consider how it is a creation, can look at the world and be like, wow, such design, such natural forces at work, godlike spheres, but you see that when the unknown glances at you, your knowledge is worth nothing. Meaning that the greatest explorations are not done through languages and technologies per se. They are done by the intention of the remodification of reality through an innate sense that if you go a further step, you will see a bit more, For me, I'm not too much of a big fan of Andy Warhol, but I respect that man's creativity, and he has this very interesting quote where he says, "Those people who go on the edge, they see things others don't," and so that's very interesting, because to go on the edge means to go on the edge of the memories you have kept valid. So for me, when I want to see if something is rationally true or not, when I want to justify something, it's as if in my mind, as if it's this, dark forest, and suddenly I take a flashlight onto certain memories that can relate. And so this is why we find the phenomena of communication to be the bread and butter of our species. Communication is the greatest opportunity after 4 billion years of evolution that could come to this creature that we are. And this creature is not alone. We are social creatures in the sense that even though there are those who, in many ancient books, there's been sages, shamans, rishis, you know, um, certain dervishes who these beings would, yogis, these beings would go into isolation, but it would be an isolation where they are seeking a greater union. It's like rather than them wanting to get to know other people, they want to get to know the truth of conscious existence. And so as they do, they realize you reach a point where if you try to find truth, you can never be certain because in your effort to see, there is a bias of what you're going to see. Right? So, in some sense, meditation comes down to pure preferencelessness. And this is what nobody tells people. They tell you, go meditate, go find, go unite with God. And it's like I see so many people that spirituality becomes a story for them because they feel they need authority outside of their self. This is why when, I remember I was in Iran and there was this gathering of people speaking about philosophically oriented ideas and also abstract sort of considering spiritualism, right? So I went to this sort of like underground spiritual gathering. And in this spiritual gathering, I wasn't there to speak. There were many guest speakers who came and spoke, but last second I was called up. Last second, so I was the last speaker, and everybody who had come behind me who was speaking, they spoke about like they never dared to touch the question of what is the soul? What is the soul of the soul of the soul? So in some sense, I sat there with watching many people much, much older than me who I just innately respected by the cultural elegance of that gathering. But it was one of those things where at the end when I was given the microphone, they told me I have 10 minutes and I finished in 8. But what I said there was that it was as if a part of me noticed that these people will hear me speak only once, you know? Because as much as I love Iran, it does not suit my tastes in all ways. So what I mean by this is that I went there and I said, there is no teacher. There is no guru. The only duty and responsibility of any sort of spiritual teacher is to be a mirror. And that's all that they can be. And the reason the guru, as in certain cultures, it's acknowledged, especially in the New Age community, they're all trying to find the next guru with the biggest amount of followers. I'm telling you, the guru without the guru, the external guru has one responsibility to make you realize before you need a guru, you are the guru within. You are the source of intelligence of your being, and you can consider this. This has been denied to many. They have been denied being a cause in their life. Rather, they are shaped by the effects of hard conditions which they don't know how to solve because they consider the problems are too colossal, you know? There's the Sufi mystic poet named Jalaluddin Maulana Rumi. He has this very profound quote. He actually has these two quotes, which I'm going to share because they parallel one another in some sense, and the theme of this talk. This Sufi mystic, ancient Persian poet from 700 years ago, he says this: I have lived on the edge of insanity, on the lip of insanity, wanting to know reasons, knocking on a door. It opens. I've been knocking from the inside. Rumi says to us through another gaze, out beyond ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a place. I will meet you there. When the soul sits on that grass, the world is too full to talk about. In other words, it is, if we are seeking knowledge through external noise, it's as if the ancient mystics were giving us clues to this grand cosmic puzzle of consciousness, that it is within this, it is a silent internal reality, but not a reality confined by the conditions of a certain location. Even though I sit on this planet, I am the universe. For what else can be here? There is a collectivism and an individualization that one automatically is thrown in the moment the child learns to speak. The moment they tell the name of the child looks, and the child begins to accumulate a sort of individuality, as if people are talking to the child, as if out of many things in the environment, their attention is there. So, in other words, our attentions to one another contribute to our individuality. But in doing so, the moment the person becomes individual, the person has also been divided in duality, has been pushed into a realm where if there is an individual sense of self, that individual self will for the whole lifetime consider, what about the collective self, And so it is very, in some sense, for Mr. Within at least, I mean, I can't say it's too obvious, but it seems very evident that religions were in some sense, these revelations were received by individuals who had in some sense totally witnessed their individuality, and were no longer playing the games of an individual man in a cosmically changing existence, as if um, a man who seeks truth in a changing world will soon realize within his eyes the world turns. Isolation can be a gift from the gods, or it can be an unnecessary prison. For me, there have been moments where I have learned when I have been among my species. There's been moments where I have learned when I have just been alone with the world, with the natural world. Like I just went into nature, sat still, and for a second I began to realize just the energy of the environment. Excuse me. The energy of the environment, in some sense, um, shifting the atmosphere of thought and how thoughts would generate. So for me, emotions are in some sense, emotions pull memories. Emotions are our relationship with our past and our future, because an emotion reminds you of the past and then an emotion makes you responsible for the future. So in some sense, our orientation of imagination, thought, and everything has to do with our emotion, and our emotions have to do to some degree with how our physical bodies are, and in some degree how our inner sense of a mind beyond form is a spontaneous intelligent factor in our lives. The freedom found behind the doors of isolation is a freedom that is no longer it's a permission to be unconditionally prior to thought and prior to definition. It's pre-thought. It's a pre-thought state of present being where you realize you'll suddenly laugh at your sadness. You know, you laugh at your sadness, stress, depression, any sort of dark cloud you have placed on your horizon, and you're going to, in some sense, realize that even our problems change. And you know, a problem has two sorts of solution. Either um, uh, you change, which means the how you perceive the problem changes, or you find an answer that causes the problem to cease to exist. In a sense, changing it. So there is an indirect and direct approach to the survival of not just physicality, but the survival of thought. And the survival of conscious thought through an attributeless and formless attention. It all comes down to how your attention it opens up to the world, which implies how the world opens up to you. Some people wait their whole lives behind the doors of isolation, beyond the doors of shyness, beyond the doors of a sense of insecurity. And I will tell you, this life is not meant for us to just all be secure. This life is meant to be lived. That means, as lions of our species, we require to roar in a way where the future honors the stability of the civilization's advancement. You know, we have to the pillars of civilizations are in some sense people's willingness to allow genius to bloom in the future. And genius cannot bloom if the environment of the world is not peaceful. You see what I mean? It is only in peacefulness where the greatest ideas show themselves, because they are given a permission to collaborate without violent interruption. The picture I chose for this live stream, you see a man seemingly on some sort of other planet witnessing Earth and other things, you know. And so that is a sort of isolation where, as if you're around no one, distance is displaying its art all at once. And at once, all that is all that there can be. So what I'm telling you is, in an individual's effort to find truth, the truth of an individual is void to the collective truth. Hence, we must be playful in our individual lives and realize that it is, in some sense, a collective vision that will heal mankind from the greatest sin. The greatest sin is ignorance, because it is a blindfold that you never dared to take off, but you always could. And sometimes self-created isolation is a blindfold, but sometimes isolation is, in some sense, a remedy. It's as if how the being can refine its self-awareness in realizing that it does not have to depend on meaning and value only on the external uh, expressions that are displayed. Internally, your mind, you gotta honor it. You gotta honor it not as if you're afraid of the unknown. You gotta honor it as if this is the mind, this is the intelligence and the vision and the expression that has come to you. Your eyes have opened in such a way, and your way is nobody's way, and should not be in anybody's way. Because the moment the vision of greatness of mankind is opposed, attacked, or hindered, that is when the greatest justice will come out of the corners of ignorance and just, it's like, how would I say this? It's as if an honest man is the only true king. Seek a royalty beyond thought and form. The greatest revelation is how all the expectations of knowledge are within the unknown. Every being is receiving prophetic revelations of their moment of existence in every moment. It is a self-awareness, a self-realization of a sort of dynamic understanding through static moments of comprehension. I don't know how to say it, like it's those who break the doors of isolation and attain a sort of cosmically divine solitude, they will see the collective's true nature, and they will realize humanity's vision may never die. Much blessings and namaste.